Excerpt from the Sutra on the Contemplation of Sitting Meditation, translated by Kumarajiva. Question: if one can also sever thoughts by the other four types of meditations, such as the meditation on the impurities and calling the Buddha to mind, why does one only count the breath? Answer: it is because the objects of the other meditations are slow and hard to lose, but the object of counting the breath is quick and easy to turn away. To illustrate, when one releases cattle, since they are hard to lose, keeping them is an easy business. When one releases monkeys, however, since they are easy to lose, keeping them is a difficult task. The matter is the same here. When counting the breath, the mind cannot think of other beings even for a moment. Once the mind thinks of other things, it will lose the number. For this reason, when one first attempts to sever thoughts, one should count the breath. When one has already attained the method of counting, one should practice the method of following the breath and sever thoughts. When inhalation is completed, one should follow it out without counting too. It is just like a creditor who follows a debtor and does not let him go. Think as follows: this inhaled air goes out again, but it is not the same thing. Exhaled air comes in again, but it is not the same thing. At that time, one will know that inhalation and exhalation are different. For what reason? Exhalation is warm, but inhalation is cool. Question: is it not that inhalation and exhalation are one continuous breath because the exhaled air enters again? It is just like water that is warm in one's mouth but becomes cool when spit out. A cool thing gets warm again, and a warm thing further gets cool. Answer: this is not the case. Because the inner mind moves, breath goes out. Once it has gone out, it ceases to exist. Because the nostrils draw in the external air, breath comes in. Once it has come in, it ceases to exist. There is no air that is about to move out, nor is there air that is about to move in. Furthermore, one should consider the cases of young people, adults, and old people. In the case of young people, inhalation is longer. In the case of adults, inhalation and exhalation are of the same length. In the case of old people, exhalation is longer. Therefore, inhalation and exhalation cannot be one breath. Also, wind arises near the navel and appears to keep going. Breath goes out of the mouth and nose. Once it goes out, it ceases, just like the wind in bellows that ceases when the bellows are opened. If the air is drawn in by means of the mouth and nose, wind enters the body. This wind arises anew based on causes and conditions. It is just like a fan that produces wind when it meets with various conditions. At that time, one knows that inhalation and exhalation depend on causes and conditions and are delusive and unreal. They are impermanent and not free from arising and ceasing. One should contemplate in the following way. Exhalation is drawn in by the mouth and nose as causes and conditions. The causes and conditions of inhalation are brought about by the movement of mind. A deluded person, however, does not know this and thinks that it is his own breath. Breath is none other than wind, which is not different from external wind. Earth, water, fire, and space are also in the same way. Because these five gross elements come together as causes and conditions, consciousness arises. Therefore, even consciousness is not one's own possession. The five aggregates, the 12 realms of cognition, and the 18 constituent elements are also in the same way. Knowing this, one follows the breath coming in and going out. For this reason, this method is called following the breath. When one has mastered the method of following, one should practice the method of fixing. The fixing method is to fix the mind to the gates of the wind, i.e. the nostrils, and be mindful of inhalation and exhalation after the mind of counting and following is completed. Question: for what reason does one fix one's mind? Answer: it is because one needs to sever various discursive thoughts, because one should not let the mind be distracted, because the mind is unfixed and preoccupied when one counts and follows the breath, because when one fixes the mind becomes restful and freed from preoccupations, and because the mind rests at one point. Being mindful of inhalation and exhalation is just like a gatekeeper who stays by the gate and who watches the people going in and out. In the same way, the fixed mind knows that when the breath goes out, it goes from the navel to the heart, chest, throat, and then reaches the mouth and nose. The fixed mind further knows that when the breath comes in, it comes from the mouth and nose to the throat, chest, heart, and then reaches the navel. That way one fixes the mind to one spot, and this method is called fixing. Then, while one practices the method of fixing the mind, one should dwell in the method of contemplation. The 5 aggregates which arise and cease when one inhales are different from those which also arise and cease when one exhales. Thus, when the mind is disturbed, one should remove the disturbance immediately. One should contemplate single-mindedly and make one's contemplation more intense. This is called the contemplation method. One dispenses with abiding at the gates of the wind, the nostrils, and gives up the method of coarse contemplation. When one gives up the method of coarse contemplation, one knows the impermanence of the breath. This is called the shifting contemplation. When one contemplates the impermanence of the 5 aggregates and also reflects on the impermanence of inhalation and exhalation. One sees that the initial breath does not come from anywhere and observes that the subsequent breath also leaves no trace. They come into being because their causes and conditions meet, and they cease to exist because their causes and conditions disperse. This is called the method of shifting contemplation, which removes the 5 obstacles of meditation and various defilements. Though one attained calming and contemplation before, they were compounded with defilements and an impure mind. Now, in this pure method, the mind only attains purity without any defilements mixed in. Furthermore, the previous contemplation was a practice similar to non-Buddhist teachings of mindful inhalation and exhalation. The present one is a practice close to undefiled wisdom, and though still defiled, it is a good path. This is called purification. Next, first one observes part of the application of mindfulness to the body. Gradually, one observes all the applications of mindfulness to the body. Then one practices the application of mindfulness to sensation and to the mind. In these 3 types of applications of mindfulness, the practice is impure and far from undefiled wisdom. So, being mindful of inhalation and exhalation, one observes their 16 aspects. Thus, one attains the stages of heat, summit, recognition, supremacy in the mundane realm, and further, recognition of the elements of suffering up to the awareness of extinction of all defilements of an accomplished practitioner who has nothing more to learn. This is called purification. Among the 16 methods, 1. The first practice of inhalation includes the 6-fold practice of inhalation and exhalation, i.e. counting, following, fixing, contemplation, shifting, and purification. 2. So does the process of exhalation. 3. Single-mindedly, one is mindful of inhalation and exhalation and knows whether they are long or short. For example, a person running in terror, climbing a mountain, carrying a heavy load, or being upset. In such situations, the breath becomes short. When in times of peril, one attains a great relief and joy, acquires profit, or is released from jail. In such cases, the breath becomes long. All breaths are classified into 2 categories, long and short. For this reason it is said, the breath is long, the breath is short. Thus, observing the length of the breath, one also practices the 6-fold practice of inhalation and exhalation. 4. Being mindful of the breath pervading the body, one is still mindful of the breaths going out and coming in. One thoroughly observes the exhalations and inhalations within one's body. One perceives the breath pervading the body and filling all pores down to those on the toes, just like water soaking into the sand. When the breath goes out, one perceives the breath pervading all pores, from those on the feet to those on the head, also like water soaking into sand. Just like the air that fills bellows, whether it is going out or coming in, the wind blowing in and out through the mouth and nose fills the body. One observes the whole body that the wind fills, like holes of a lotus root filled with water, and a fishing net soaked in water. Further, it is not that the mind only observes the breath coming in and going out through the mouth and nose. The mind sees the breath coming in and going out through all the pores and the 9 apertures of the body. Thus one knows that the breath pervades the body. 5. Eliminating various unfavorable physical functions, one is again mindful of inhalation and exhalation. When one first practices mindful breathing, if one feels laziness, sleepiness, and heaviness in one's body, one should eliminate them all. The body becomes light, soft, and fitting for meditation. Thus the mind experiences joy. Again, by being mindful of inhalation and exhalation, one eliminates laziness, sleepiness, and heaviness of mind. The mind becomes light, soft, and fitting for meditation. Thus the mind experiences joy. Having completed the application of mindfulness to breathing, next one practices the application of mindfulness to sensation, namely having attained the application of mindfulness to the body. Now one further attains the application of mindfulness to sensation, thus one truly experiences joy. Further, having understood the reality of the body, one now wishes to know the reality of the mind and mental functions. For this reason, one experiences joy. 7. By being mindful of inhalation and exhalation, one experiences comfort. By being mindful of inhalation and exhalation, joy increases. It is called comfort. Alternatively, the first pleasure that arises in the mind is called joy. The subsequent joy that fills the body is called comfort. Also, the comfortable sensations in the first and second stages of meditation are called joy. The comfortable sensations in the third stage of meditation are called comfort. 8. When one experiences various mental phenomena, one should also be mindful of inhalation and exhalation. Various types of mind arise and cease: polluted mind, unpolluted mind, distracted mind, concentrated mind, righteous mind, and evil mind. Such aspects of mind are called mental phenomena. When the mind experiences joy, one should still be mindful of inhalation and exhalation. The joy experienced before arose spontaneously and was not aroused intentionally. Because one is mindful of one's own mind, one is gladdened. Question: for what reason does one arouse joy intentionally? Answer: it is because one wishes to cure the two types of mind, distracted and concentrated. By putting the mind in such a state of joy, one can be liberated from defilements. For this reason, one applies one's mindfulness to the elements, and the mind arouses joy. If the mind is not gladdened spontaneously, one should diligently gladden the mind. 10. When the mind is concentrated, one should also be mindful of inhalation and exhalation. If the mind is unsettled, one should forcibly settle it. As is stated in a sutra, when the mind is settled, that is wisdom. When the mind is scattered, that is not wisdom. 11. When the mind is emancipated, one should also be mindful of inhalation and exhalation. If the mind is not emancipated spontaneously, one should forcibly emancipate it. It is just like a sheep that has many cockleburs stuck to it, which one is trying to pull out of its wool one by one. Releasing the mind from binding defilements is done in the same way. This is called emancipation by means of the application of mindfulness to the mind. 12. Observing impermanence, one should also be mindful of inhalation and exhalation. One observes that the elements are impermanent, they arise and cease, they are empty and without self. When they arise, the elements arise in emptiness, and when they cease in emptiness. In these elements there is no male, no female, no person, no agent, and no recipient. This is the observation in conformity with impermanence. 13. Observing the emergence and dispersal of conditioned elements, one is mindful of inhalation and exhalation. This is called emergence and dispersal. When conditioned elements emerge in the world, they gather because causes and conditions met in the past, and they disperse because those causes and conditions cease. Such observation is called the observation of emergence and dispersal. 14. Observing release from binding desires, one is mindful of inhalation and exhalation. When the mind is released from its binding defilements, it will be the supreme element. This is the observation in conformity with the release from desires. 15. Observing extinction, one is mindful of inhalation and exhalation. The suffering of binding defilements is exhausted wherever one is situated, and the spot of one's present residence becomes peaceful. This is the observation in conformity with extinction. 16. Observing abandonment, one is also mindful of inhalation and exhalation. Abandonment of lust, defilements, the five aggregates consisting of physical and mental elements, and the conditioned elements, this is the supreme serenity. Such observation is in conformity with the application of mindfulness to the elements. These are called the 16 methods.